Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Nile.
And I'm Kyle, and I just wanted to kind of come out and say, because I know people are going to be asking with the news that's coming out real soon, probably around the time that this episode goes up, I did launch all of the balloons.
Okay, good. I'm glad to finally get this out there because you and I have talked about this, and I did not know it was all of them. You did mention that you had some balloon plans.
Yeah.
But I thought it was more like, maybe like three, I thought it was a smaller scale operation. But I thought you were just going to Party City, but I guess you went to like the weather balloon, wherever you buy fucking weather balloons.
Well, here's the fun fact about that, Nile, that you maybe didn't realize. First of all, I'm sorry that I wasn't fully honest about the sort of scale of the balloon operation that I was planning. It did get pinned on China, which I didn't intend at all. But here's the thing you're really going to like. Weather balloons, actually, there is an entire section at Party City for weather balloons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so I just got like a whole bunch of those, and I've been sending them up all over the place, and they've kind of gotten out of control. And I just wanted to apologize for freaking people out about that, because a lot of people thought that it was aliens or it was spy tech or both, and that's my bad.
I'm owning that. But also, did at Party City, do they have weather balloons with like Pikachu and stuff on it? Is that a thing?
Yeah, you can get like a Rick and Morty weather balloon. Oh, wait, hang on.
Can you?
Yeah, you can actually.
They're on clearance right now.
Party City has not caught up with the current news about that. So they have a whole backlog of really funny Rick and Morty. Like there's a Pickle Rick.
See, this is one of those things that it highlights one of the downfalls of doing like weekly podcasting.
Right.
Is you have a tendency to just like fill in little gaps of like these are my reference points for an easy pull for a joke, and when something like what has happened with Justin Roiland happens, sometimes you haven't updated that Rolodex quite so quickly. And we're not advocating for it.
No.
It's just
it is awkward, with the news cycle too, and podcasting and our schedule and stuff, because I'm gonna be completely honest with you, not all the balloons I launched are accounted for yet, so there's probably gonna be more.
Can you confirm that you did launch some during the Trump administration?
Yeah, I can confirm that for you right here,
cool.
right now,
because there seems to be some questions. So
there's a couple questions. Real quick, before we actually talk about the thing that you spent all your time researching and putting effort into, I want to bring up the fact that we got an email.
Shit. Okay. We can eat this week.
Fucking finally.
I'm hungry.
Consummate podcast listener, Weird John, has contacted us once again. And they say, hey guys, I love episodes. This is in reference to the UFO grab bag, the alien grab bag episode, which was that last week?
That was last week, yeah.
Okay. So it says, I love episodes like this. Usually UFO episodes of podcasts aren't my cup of tea, but I enjoyed these short, weird stories. Anyway, I tried to make your floating grape alien with a TV head and paddles with AI art. For some reason, it wasn't picking up on the paddles. Again, attached are a few of the top contenders out of the dozens. Also, I attached 2 images from my personal collection that I thought you might enjoy. Feel free to publicly share anything I email unless I explicitly say not to. I generally operate under the assumption that nothing that I email is private. Great show as always. Thank you, Weird John. I love these. There's one that I especially love that's just like I don't even. I mean, it looks kind of like a really demented Muppet.
Okay.
One looks kind of like almost like a. It almost looks like a tardigrade to me, but
Okay.
like pink and fluffy. So these are fun. So now that we have permission, I'm gonna just blast these out into the Twitter sphere. On the It Gets Weird. Follow us at IGW Podcast on Twitter. As long as that
Definitely.
platform's still around.
Yeah, as long as that still opens. It is funny to think that, you know, if you blast these out right now, it's before we've actually they're not canon yet because this show won't go out for another couple days.
That's true.
So
That's
but I was like thinking
Scheduling.
of like, oh, people have to go back to, you know, go back on the feed a little bit and find the episode find the images when they listen to this episode.
They'll
Wow,
be up. Hit the media tab. You know,
Oh,
that's hit the media tab on Twitter, provided any of that still functions properly when this episode goes live.
that's the blanket statement for all references
For
to
all Twitter
from here on
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And until Elon gets personally wronged by some feature on his own fucking service and decides to cripple it.
Yeah.
It's So
Sad state of affairs. Sad day.
yeah. Anyway, this week, Kyle,
Yeah.
I honestly had to like triple check that we hadn't done this already
Been there.
because it's a cryptid. We're going to talk about a cryptid today.
Mm.
And it is one that just like I honestly, how I found it was on my list and I was like, oh, we've done that. And I was about to delete it. And I went to go find what episode it was and realized we hadn't. So today, Kyle, I want to take you to meet the Van Meter visitor.
Now, I like the structure of the naming structure of cryptids like that. Like, oh Jesus, why am I blanking as soon as I need to?
Well, we had the mill race monster.
Mill
We
race
had,
monster.
that kind of stuff. I like that one because I was going through that one came up in my search for this cryptid because I was just trying to double check things and I remembered that was when we covered our hometown cryptid, the mill race monster.
I don't know if we've actually covered it on the show, but a name that pops in my head because it's fun in my brain and it tickles my brain and it's fun to say is the Carmel area creature. The Carmel
I don't
area
remember
creature.
if we've done that one or
It's
not, but I have
very-
come across it.
I think it may have been mentioned because it gets lumped in with the Fresno Nightcrawlers. Because it's kind of similar. It's almost like if you were to take the genes off of a Fresno Nightcrawler and have some sort of fleshy thing underneath. That's kind of what the Carmel area creature looks like. So,
Okay.
But I can't remember if we've actually talked about that one. I don't know.
I don't
maybe.
think that one has been an episode yet, but we've got a bunch of them. I had forgot. Looking through the early episodes, there are ones that I've entirely forgotten about. So, today we're gonna go to my actual birth state of Iowa and meet the Van Meter visitor from Van Meter, Iowa.
Now, have you been to Van Meter?
Not that I know of. I've been through a lot of small towns, and this is a very small town. Like nowadays, I think it said something along the lines of it was like 1,000 people or whatever. But back then there were like 400 when we're talking about. So this is like a very small town. So I don't think I've ever like been there, but there is every chance that I've driven through it at some point.
Okay.
Because this takes place all the way back in 1903. So we're talking like over 100 years ago at this point. So this is an early cryptid sighting that I know that cryptids have been seen forever because like it's there a lot of them come from folklore and all this stuff. But like once cryptids got kind of into a thing, I'm curious like there's the analog of like the 40s through the 60s of UFO encounters where like that's the early days of UFO encounters. I know I've done cryptid stuff in like the 1800s, but this feels pretty early. For cryptids.
Well, and I mean with UFOs, it's like a lot of that coincides with like how our relationship, like the United States in particular, like our relationship to like the future and technology and things like that, and science fiction that's kind of in the air. I don't know whether I could pinpoint like what it is that. I mean, I feel like human history has always kind of talked about weird creatures.
Yeah.
But to have it sort of like have it be like, I don't know, would you say like codified the way it is
Yeah.
now, and it's like I don't know exactly when, because there's plenty of late 19th century like weird creature stories, early 20th century, especially
Mhm.
with Bigfoot. So I don't know where I have more trouble pinpointing like a delineating point for that phenomenon. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's partially just because of like how cryptids have spun out of a lot of different belief systems
Right.
and cultures in a way that like we talk about the rise of UFOs and stuff, and that is but that is almost more based on a paranoia of the society at the time.
Hmm.
And then you look at cryptids, and that's always just kind of a reflection of humankind's eternal fear of there being something that goes bump in the dark, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right.
uh and so like that has been forever. And so I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I think it's I I've the more we talk about like how UFO stuff has progressed over time, the more I start trying to think about like the growth in the field of other things we cover. Like
Hmm.
we've talked about how parapsychology is like goes into some of the ghost stuff
Yeah,
and
born out of like
everything.
spiritualism,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
And so I keep thinking like where of just the origin of this kind of shit, because it's interesting. I guess I'm in that
Crypto.
kind of place right now.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I feel that. And cryptozoology is like a little bit amorphous, but like you could maybe like point to like the solidifying of the idea of cryptozoology, but like that is like I want to say maybe not until the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
Um that's honestly probably because like I know I've run across the name of the person who coined the term cryptozoology, and I think it's maybe later than you might expect.
Hmm.
Um, so like that's like a point you could like look at, but yeah, it's definitely I feel like the phenomenon predates the coining of the term by quite a bit. I think so,
Right.
it is also one of those things where like there's sightings and stories and legends that like are sort of retroactively like fit into the
Hmm.
cryptozoology canon, which is a term I overuse, but you know what I mean. So I don't
Yeah.
know. It is an interesting thing to think about, and I've been there. I've been mentally there for a while too.
Regardless, this story takes place across 5 nights in
At Freddy's.
September and
Oh,
October. Yes,
okay.
5 nights at Freddy's, 5 nights in Van Meter. I don't think there's a Chuck E. Cheese in Van Meter, at least at the time. And I know that's not specifically 5 nights at Freddy's, but come on. So uh, this this was a 5 day or 5 night sighting of a creature that was is a lot of times described as like half human, half like bat or something. That this is kind of pterodactyl-y. I've got
Hmm.
some descriptions in a little bit, but this was a flying cryptid from the 1903 that terrorized the town of Van Meter, Iowa, for 5 fucking nights in a row, which I find really interesting when something kind of sets up residence for a couple days in these cryptid sightings.
Yeah, that's typically not the case, especially after cameras and things become more commonplace.
Yeah.
I'm guy who is only I'm getting real Camazotz vibes, but you could just say guy
Yeah.
who has only seen one
Getting
bat
real boss baby
cryptid.
vibes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
I've got some stuff later on about cryptids that this thing gets either kind of lumped in with or whatever. We'll get to that, but I want to start with the story. And uh so one thing that you got to know about this cryptid just going forward is that supposedly it stinks to fucking high heaven.
We
This
love that.
thing supposedly it a lot of times gets described as like a sulfur type smell. But it also, more than anything, whenever someone talks about the smell of this thing, it's just about how fucking strong and bad it was.
We love a stinky
So
cryptid.
yeah, this is kind of like in some ways this is kind of Mothman's stinky cousin. Uh or I guess even like grandfather, because Mothman was after this shit.
Hmm.
So we're gonna go ahead and start on the night of September 29th, 1903. Uh in the town of Van Meter, Iowa, as previously mentioned, there is a farm implement salesman named UG Griffith who was, I guess, out at work throughout the day, was coming home at night. Sorry, not even at night. This this all happened at like 1 o'clock in the morning. So this
Ooh.
guy was like out very late. I don't know what the fuck he was selling at that point. He was in the town of Van Meter. And most of the town was asleep, which is why he's the only one really involved in this initial sighting. But he saw this really bright light that was coming from on top of a 2-story building on Main Street, called like Mather and Greg's, I guess is the name of the building that he was seeing this from. And it was like a fucking like beacon or like a lighthouse type thing. It was projecting almost like a beam of light from this 2-story building that he could see from like outside town.
I was going to ask you to sort of describe the town, but I got to be honest with you. The date 1903 and a place called Mather and Greg's does a lot of heavy lifting as far as like conjuring an image in my head goes. So
yeah, if you think of like small town America
Yes.
in 1900s, you're going to get a pretty good example of what this is. Like this is very much a small town middle America place. You know, it's got a main
Yeah.
street and then everyone kind of lives out around it. I
Yep.
didn't do a lot of research on how it looks now.
I
but
can guess. It all sounds familiar.
yeah. So, of course, UG Griffith saw this light and thought, hey, what is going on here? And decided to go into town to try to see what was happening. And so he came in and was walking up Main Street, and he saw all of a sudden the light jumped across the street onto a building across the street. So it basically jumped over the street and faced the other direction. And he of course, was very confused by this happening. And he continued to walk towards it, and then all of a sudden, the light just entirely vanishes.
Now, leaping from building to building makes me think. My brain immediately went to like a grasshopper or a cricket, a giant grasshopper or a cricket, which makes me realize, or maybe reflect. Do we get like, have there been many insect cryptids? Because I feel like insectoid beings get lumped in as aliens. But now I'm thinking like a Batman humanoid creature thing probably needs prey, which I guess I'll say it, in most of these stories, it's going to be something like maybe a dog or sheep or something. But like, what if there's just like what if there's just giant insect cryptids that are also prey for the Van Meter visitor or Camazotz, for instance?
That would be very interesting if like you get. What would a fucking massive bug cryptid eat?
These
'Cause,
cryptids,
cryptids,
they don't interact with each other, you know? Like,
yeah.
maybe we need to start seeing if we can find out like if there's like prey cryptids in the form of insects. And what would they eat? They would probably eat smaller insects or like small animals. I really don't know.
I mean, some bugs are plant based, so like
That's true.
They could also just be housing like whole tree branches, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, so that was the first night. The first night that this guy just saw a light. It jumped across the street, and then as he got too close, it went out and vanished. Then the next night on September 30th, right after midnight, a local town doctor named Dr. Alcott was asleep in the back room of his office downtown when he was all of a sudden just shot awake because this bright light was shining directly in his window onto his face. He of course awoke with a start, went and looked out the window and saw this light beaming in. So what did he do? He immediately went and got his gun and went out to investigate. And when he finally got a good look at what this thing was, he saw this creature that he said was half human, half animal, with bat-like wings and a single blunt horn in the middle of its forehead, with the light beam coming out of the horn.
Oh, now okay, interesting. So like out the tip of the horn,
like it. He
Or is
doesn't
the
get that
horn, like,
specific,
glowing?
but it a lot of the renderings of it that I've seen show it like like beaming out of the tip of the horn.
Mm,
But that is not something that I've found clarification on specifically from Dr. Alcott's account.
okay.
So he, of course, brought up his gun because thinking, oh, I should probably shoot this thing in the fucking face, and fired it, 5 shots in total, and the creature vanished. Now, he was not far from this thing, so I think Dr. Alcott was under the impression that he actually hit the thing. But there's no report of it actually taking damage or
No trail of
like
blood or
anything, or yeah. So it seems like maybe Dr. Alcott missed, or this thing is impervious to bullets. We don't really know.
I mean, he's a doctor, not a marksman. Like,
True.
like,
And he did just like wake up in the middle of the
Yeah.
night to like the weirdest thing he has ever seen. So
although I must say it's what a nice time when 1903, when men were men, women are women, and doctors passed out in their offices near their guns.
yeah, doctors keep guns in their offices. Yeah, it is interesting to think about. Like I just what would you do if you woke up and saw something like that? Like this thing, a lot of people say it's like 9 feet tall and has these massive bat wings and has like on 4 legs, and the front 2 have the wings coming off it a lot in a lot of the renderings. Like this thing looks like I mean, it looks like a Pokemon, honestly. But it's like a lot of times shown as like kind of like a not skeletal, but like I don't know, wiry, thinner body with these massive wings and a big horn coming off the side of it. It looks kind of like a dragon, honestly.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, what would you do in that situation? What would you do if you in today walked into your doctor's office and then they had an old German Luger propped up against one of their desks?
Sorry, I was just looking at this drawing again, and I'm realizing how much it looks like either the Blue Eyes or Red Eyes White Dragon
All right,
from
I'm
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Googling it. I'm Googling it.
Looks, yeah. If you just look up the Van Meter Visitor, there are a couple different drawings of it out there. The one I'm looking at is I believe a little bit more modern one, and is
Oh. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, this guy's cool. So he's like,
he's cool as shit.
he's very pterodactyl-y in a
Yep.
lot of these. Interesting. I really like the one that I'm looking at where he looks like, I don't know, he looks like he's got like an occult symbol in his chest.
Okay, yeah, that is one of the original ones from a newspaper article where his like wings are folded over and there's an occult symbol on him.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
sick.
that's from one of the actual like eyewitness accounts. I think that was published in the newspaper of Van Meter soon after the incident. So that one, it's a black and white rendering, and if you see it with like the looking like a bat with the wings folded over it, and there's a symbol on his chest, that's the one we're talking about. It's one of the more famous renderings of the creature and came from some of the very initial reporting.
That's sick. I'm looking at like you can find the newspaper clippings of this thing pretty readily. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about this is like you can just straight up read the original article from 1903 of the creature with everything involved in it, and it is not all that different from the version that I'm just telling you here. Like it's well documented to the point that of what exists there. Outside of this, there's not much else to it, I guess is what I'm gonna say.
I gotcha.
So it continued on the third night on October 1st when a bank teller by the name of Peter Dunn, he seemed to be under the impression that this was somehow a hoax that was being used to steal from the bank. I don't know where he got this idea, but he assumed this was an elaborate hoax and was making sure that he would not fall victim to the hoax. So he basically like camped out in the bank, armed and ready to take on anyone who decides to take advantage of this situation.
Hold up. Wait, okay. So this person like reads the report on this creature and decides it's
Word was going around town, I'm assuming.
Okay. And he assumes it's I mean, this predates Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's like going like this is just like a Scooby-Doo sort of situation. So I'm curious. I mean, do you have any ideas of like why this guy would
No.
assume that it was a scam to rob the bank?
I mean, I think the best I can tell you is that the way it was referred to on a lot of different sites was he was pretty convinced this whole thing was a hoax. And because it was this massive, elaborate hoax, I think he was, as someone who was involved with this bank, just trying to make sure that whatever the hoax's intention was, it didn't end up with the bank getting robbed. Um,
Gotcha. Huh.
so it was more of a preventative measure than him specifically thinking there was this conspiracy against him or whatever. But it still is like, I mean, it's still weird. Like it's a leap. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it isn't.
It's
Uh,
he just
but
seems
that's my best guess.
okay. He just seems paranoid. Would he by chance happen to like? Were you able to look this guy up and find out like, oh, he went to write at Hanna-Barbera later on or anything like that?
No, I don't think he was involved in the creation of any of the beloved Hanna-Barbera creations that Adult Swim now owns.
All right,
Um,
fair enough.
I just think that's fun to bring up every once in a while. Um, but it would be interesting if this guy ended up like going places. Here's the thing. I didn't find a lot of like people who this is still something that is like known in the town. There's actually a yearly festival for the Van Meter Visitor called the Van Meter Visitor Festival that we could go to in September if we
Yeah.
want to go to Iowa. I actually don't know. My parents live in Iowa. Maybe I could see if this
It's
is
not
close enough to them.
it's not on September 11th, is it? I got something
No,
going
it's
on that day.
you got to spend the
Uh,
day remembering.
yeah.
No, it's like at the end of the month.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's usually around the time of the beginning of the sightings, like September 30th ish.
Okay.
So that's kind of the idea. But I didn't find a lot of like people after the initial reporting that had like expanded versions of their stories.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So. However, there's one thing that came out of this that is interesting in regards to Peter Dunn. He did at around 1 a.m. He did hear this noise outside of his window that sounded like, as he described, gargled gasps, like someone was being strangled. So he went up to the window to see what was happening and was blinded by this light, as other people in the past had been. And then he was shocked by this, covered his eyes, and was trying to like, recover his vision as the light started to sweep around the room, and he saw the creature of a similar. His description was similar to that of the guy the night before, and he of course also raised his gun and fired at it, and it immediately vanished.
Vanished,
So
like flew away, or
that is how it's said. That is what places said.
okay.
It's he fired, the thing was gone. He also was visually impaired at the moment from being blinded, so I don't know if you can fully. I feel like this plays off kind of like the way Batman disappears in movies, where they cut off screen and then he's just gone.
Right,
Like
right.
there's that thing where the thing could have slinked away or flew away, or it can teleport. We're not sure. It just comes down to how well this guy was seeing after being blinded by a fucking
Sure.
laser beam.
And this thing was making the gargling noises.
Uh, seems like it.
Nobody
Yet
it was
again,
like a
it's
murdered
not.
person?
No, there was no reports of anyone getting murdered. There isn't like really a lot of. This thing didn't really hurt anybody.
Could it could it have
I
been
think there was like one thing later on, but it I don't believe it strangled anyone.
okay,
No.
didn't hurt anybody. Did it do the opposite? Could it have been that the Van Meter visitor was sucking dick?
That's the
I-
opposite of hurting someone.
Yeah, it's kind of like a I mean, I like giving somebody pleasure. It's is
Yeah,
it
I
possible
can
that
see
the
that.
Van Meter visitor was like
Oh, so the
outdoors having
okay.
a late night sort of tryst?
I thought you were just making just an unrelated sex joke, but no, I do.
No.
I do finally understand your connection there.
No,
But hey, maybe this thing was going to town on some hog. I don't know.
And it's trying to it's like, oh shit, somebody's interrupting our midnight suck sesh, and they flashed a light to blind the guy so he couldn't see anybody's business and disappeared.
A light that is so bright so as to blind someone if they get hit by it, like at least temporarily, is a pretty good way to try to stay on the DL.
Yeah,
Because if you're ever caught, you just like flash them in the eyes, and
exactly.
you try to do it as quickly as you can, so that their memory isn't like they don't have like a clear memory of the situation, and then you get the fuck out of there. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Thank you for saying so.
Now, the thing that I was going to say about Peter Dunn earlier, before I realized I hadn't actually told you the accounting. There's another thing that gets referenced sometimes as Peter Dunn and sometimes as someone who I guess had to have been related to him named Clarence Dunn.
Okay.
There is supposedly a plaster cast of a footprint of the Van Meter visitor. It's a three-toed footprint that was left behind the creature at some point during this 5-day span. Um, it a lot of times gets linked with the third day with Peter Dunn, just because that basically this cast was supposedly taken by either Clarence or Peter Dunn, which depending on the accounting you're reading. However, it has disappeared, and you can't find it. No one knows where it is.
When did it disappear? Like way back then, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not too long after. I don't have a specific date, but it gets referenced in accountings of the time. And then there's we're going to get into it a little bit later. There's or we can mention it now. There was a book that was written in like 2013, I want to say, or maybe it was a little more recently, sometime in the last like 10 years. And the people that wrote it, Chad Lewis, Noah Vaughn, and Kevin Lee Nelson, they did a lot of extensive research, interviewing people in the town, looking with historians, going through all this stuff, and they were completely unable to find this plaster cast or any record of it. That outside of just like the insinuations of like newspapers and stuff. Like there was no idea where it went.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe it didn't exist at all.
Maybe. So soon after this, it was the next day, but it was less than 24 hours later. A hardware merchant by the name of O.V. White was yet again asleep in his room over the hardware store on Main Street when he was awakened by a strange rasping sound. He also grabbed his gun and went to the window, as is now tradition. That's just what you do. And he saw across the street, he saw something perched on the cross piece of a telephone pole. So like a perched atop a telephone pole, effectively. And he raised up his gun and shot at it. And as soon as he shot at it, instead of this thing disappearing, it turned its light on effectively and started shining it directly at White. And he, at the same time, was overwhelmed by this awful odor and was essentially, between these two things, incapacitated. Now, at the same time, or around the same time, another local merchant named Sidney Gregg was seemingly awakened by White's gunshot. He came out his front door and was looking down Main Street and also saw this monster perched on top of a telephone pole. He claims that it was at least 8 feet tall with a beak like a bird, bat-like wings, and 4 legs.
Okay.
He was able to kind of look at it for a little bit, and he saw that it started to lower itself from the telephone pole like a parrot descending, like a,
Oh,
how parrots climb cages?
I can picture that, yeah.
So it went down the telephone pole like that, using its beak and everything. And it then, like, as it hit the ground, it stopped and just kind of seemed to listen.
Okay. So much of this sounds like it could like actually just be explained by people misidentifying like a heron or something, like a big bird. But
you want to know something?
Yeah.
That is there is a show that covered this thing that did exactly that. Supposedly, one of the theories for this whole thing is that there was someone in the nearby area who had an exotic bird collection, and they had I forget the exact. It was a type of heron. I believe I have it.
The
somewhere
dick sucking heron.
Yeah, the cock gargling heron. It escaped and was seen in this place, and like we've talked about before, it's not a lot of times, especially out in the distance in the sky or like up above you, you sometimes have a hard time getting a sense of scale of things.
Right.
So some people think that this was just a heron that was shown to be because it was catching people off guard at night, people perceived as larger and monstrous.
The only really anomalous thing about that explanation is the light, but like maybe this guy with his exotic pet collection had put a headlamp on the thing and trained it to flick it on and off.
Yeah, I never got a direct like, okay, if it was this type of bird, how do we get the like fucking like floodlight type, like, because no one describes this as just like a little weak like flashlight bulb. It is like piercing and intense and like blinding type light. So maybe there's something with like its bill and the moonlight or some shit, but like that's the only thing that the bird theory doesn't really explain.
Yeah. Interesting.
So once this thing was at the base of a telephone pole, just kind of standing and listening, seemingly like intently like paying attention to what is going on around it. And just around that time, the mail train started to go through town, and it startled the being, which went into like a kind of like the way it gets described is like when a cat is preparing to pounce, it goes into like a that kind of like ready position.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it instead of actually flying away, it flaps its wings and like almost hopped away. Almost, it described like being like a kangaroo hop. And after doing this for a second, it just starts to run on all four legs and extends its wings and went up into the air. So it didn't just like take off from standing. It maybe this thing, it has to like have a runway type situation. I don't know exactly what this whole thing was, but there was this like multi-step process that led this thing from the ground to actually flying away.
I mean, again, this could be a heron or an exotic bird that's just like a total klutz. It's like,
totally could be.
It got down on all fours. No, it fucking tripped.
Yeah.
It
very well could be. Like, I've seen enough I've seen enough animal fails on the internet to see how this stuff could easily just be a big bird that is not the most graceful thing. But I do think in terms of like the multiple accounts that have been part of this story so far, this is the weird one to me, because in all the other ones, this thing just vanishes immediately.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
It just is all of a sudden, it is gone. At one point, it is right. Like you're looking dead at it. It shines its light, and it's gone. So this is a thing that you have to, or at least I wonder how this account lines up with those. And if we try to take everything at its word, if all of these accounts are perfectly accurate and true to real life, it almost feels like there's a like the light beam almost has the kind of time dilation UFO type thing where like if you are the missing time cut type shit.
Yeah.
So the thing doesn't actually just disappear. The light causes you to be unable to respond to stimulus or whatever the fuck, and you end up getting it just disappears by way of missing time.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
No, I kind of get what you're saying. I would the other thing that I mean, usually when it comes to these weird little tidbits in a story like this, where it's like, I don't think people saw a winged humanoid cryptid creature thing. It's like there's a possibility that details get blown out of proportion in the initial report of the thing, and then the rest of the town kind of runs with it when they see something, or they think they see something in the night or whatever. So like just for instance, like, oh, it vanished. Well, that could have been like the description, even though like what had actually happened is the thing just took off at like a great speed and flew away. But like you're shocked in the moment. It's 1 a.m., whatever. And maybe you interpret that as vanished. You know what I'm saying? So,
and also like multiple of these townspeople have tried to shoot at the thing. So maybe saying it vanished saves your ego a little bit for having entirely missed it almost point blank with multiple shots.
Yeah.
So who knows? But supposedly all these people that saw it were upstanding citizens. None of them were the town drunk.
Right. That's so important. That's important to mention.
Although none of them were cops either. So I don't know who to believe. I don't know what to believe at all. Because I only take my UFO and cryptid sightings seriously.
If a cop said it, yeah, definitely.
So this isn't the end, though. There's been so far 5 of the quote unquote leading citizens of Van Meter have seen this thing. So the town is in kind of a bit of a panic or an uproar. Like it's become the talk of the town. And this is when a nearby mine gets involved. There is a mine nearby run by a director named J.L. Platt Jr., who a couple nights on like October 3rd, I believe. So now a couple days later, he hears some kind of wild, scary sounding noises coming out of one of the mine shafts that he's in charge of. And he described the noises as though Satan and a regiment of imps were coming forth for battle.
Now, let me just say something.
Yeah.
Things and wind and whatnot passing through mines make some scary fucking noises, and I've seen videos of it. So I believe if an exotic bird flew down into that mine and started squawking up a storm, it could probably make some horrifying noises.
I do not disagree. And with the whole bird flying down a mine thing, you're kind of on the money because as he started to kind of back away a little bit, seemingly scared by the sounds he was hearing, all of a sudden a large bird-like creature came out of the mine shaft, yet again with bat-like wings and a horn protruding from its forehead, which had a piercing light shining out of it.
Okay.
However, after the first creature came out, a second smaller creature also came out of the mine. Same type of creature, just smaller. And they both flew away into the night. So now we have not one, but 2 different versions of this creature.
Interesting. It's multiplying. And can I just say, I love being on the money. It's an underrated feeling to be on the money. I think people out there should try it sometime. If you ever want to feel kind of good, be on the money about it once or twice, and you'll see what it feels like. You'll understand why I'm taking precious time out of our podcast to brag about it.
Yeah, no, it's a good feeling. So Platt, who was scared by this situation, but also realized that, we've now had this thing in a contained space. So he got a whole group of people, all armed, to stay watch at the mine. And they were basically there just monitoring the mine to see if this thing would come back. So they wanted to be prepared for when these things came back to what was maybe their home or just a place they like to go. I don't know. And just before dawn, they reappeared. As soon as they reappeared, the people who were guarding the mine just started shooting at it. And according to those who witnessed it, the quote, the reception would have sunk the Spanish fleet.
Oh my
so these
God.
people were like, these people were just letting loose with all they had. Really not having any problem making the most ruckus possible.
God.
However, yet again, they did not seem to injure these creatures at all. They just basically pissed them off. Because during this whole thing, the creatures just started to make all of these horrible rasping noises and like stinking up the place. Like this thing seems to only really attack by way of sound and stank, and it was letting loose with both sides.
This is the town full of the worst shots in the country, and
it's where they recruit all the stormtroopers from.
Yeah, they're covering up the fact that they not only failed to shoot and kill them, but got shat on by like 2 geese.
Yeah.
So like, this is just embarrassing.
Yeah.
So actually it's a demon with a horn. So
yeah, it's a blinding demon that stalks our lovely town. So after stink bombing and screaming at all of these townsfolk, the 2 monsters then flew back into the mine's entrance and disappeared inside the mine. Now, realizing that they had failed to really do much of anything other than annoy these things, the townsfolk went to Plan B, which, as far as I can tell, the thing that I know for sure happened was they barricaded the mouth of the mine. The thing that I think is most fun, that if it actually happened / I think might actually be what happened, is they took a bunch of dynamite and blew up the entrance to the cave.
God.
or into the entrance to
Jesus
the
Christ.
mine.
If this is a couple birds, then I mean, man, just overreaction is a little bit of an understatement.
Yeah, and in an interview, Lewis, Voss, and Nelson, the guys who wrote the book on the Van Meter visitor, described. They were asked, "What about the mine now? Is there currently any trace of it left in town?" And they said the mine was an enormous operation. It was 257 feet deep and big enough to have stables underground for mules.
Oh my
Sadly, there is
God.
almost no visible trace of the mine
Oh
today.
my God.
We
That's
stood at the site of the mine's opening. All that remained is a bowl-shaped depression in the ground.
Oh my God. These fucking people are wow. If that's birds, that is just wow. Really embarrassing for everybody involved.
Yeah. So the next day after sealing this mine, hopefully by dynamite, because that's what I want it to happen, a story appeared in the Des Moines Daily News under the byline H.H. Phillips.
Local idiots
that-
destroy mine because of birds.
Yeah, this is the article that you probably saw online. This is the Van Meter Visitor original article that did from I read it. It was not. It wasn't like mean to the people involved here. It seemed like it just basically tried to report what was believed to have happened. And it because it didn't just like immediately cite this all as like a hoax or say that it was just townspeople being silly. This kind of piqued up some interest around the country, and newspapers started to report this, like kind of carry their own versions of this report. It kind of became a bit of a thing in newspapers around the country. The following day, the Des Moines Daily News ran another story, which kind of undercut all that by saying that they think the first story had been exaggerated, and that basically that all that had really happened was they encountered some kind of unexplained light and shot at it, which undercuts everything about this.
Yeah.
And then in the days that followed, a lot of other papers would start to kind of do follow-ups and stuff. So there was this kind of quick flash of like, okay, something weird happened here, and then immediately all the papers were like, maybe not. So that is like the original idea of the Van Meter visitor. That's the original story, and mostly that's the end of it. However, there have been some maybe sightings of it since then, which I'll get into in just a second. But yeah, it really flared up, and then they immediately try to shut it down.
I have this image, I have this vision in my head of like them setting off a fucking bomb to blow up the mine, and just like a nearby like house door swings open, an angry man steps out, and he's just like, "Will you quiet it down out there? You're gonna scare my giant exotic birds."
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
too much. It's so that's so crazy. It just town
Yeah.
destroys their own mine because the bird creatures freaked them out.
Well, here's kind of an interesting side piece to all of this, because while the people that did report the sightings were believed to be kind of upstanding citizens of the town, all like leading people in the town, businessmen, whatever the fuck, the kind of odd side note to all of this is that at the time, Van Meter had been experiencing a bit of an economic slump. They had kind of had a downturn in production. The coal mine had been the kind of main thing in the town, but it seemed tapped.
Oh.
So there is kind of a theory that the town's leading citizens might have kind of surveyed the reality of their situation. And because of some other stuff at the time, like the kind of rise of these, the kind of sideshow stuff, whether it's the ones that get referenced in a lot of the reports here, that I've read, kind of looking at this time period, are like Spring-Heeled Jack,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Cardiff Giant. Basically, there were like this was not too far. Oh, like flying dragons in Texas and Kansas, even flying crocodiles in California. Like this had been a thing where local people would see kind of strange creatures. It would bring some buzz to the town, and something may or may not happen from it. So there is a theory that I could totally see being true, that basically these townsfolk were trying to find a way to kind of revitalize entrepreneurship and like business in the town and stay like work together on this crazy story. And then the newspapers caught on to it and kind of
Okay,
whatever.
what you're saying to me right now is
Mhm.
it is in fact some Scooby Doo shit.
It might actually be, in fact, some Scooby Doo
Wow,
shit. You are correct.
amazing.
Um, yeah, so that's the kind of the little button on the story that I thought was interesting because like it's easy to look at stories from that long ago and think, well, there wouldn't like no one was writing cryptid books back then, or they're
Right.
not going to go do talks places. So what kind of benefit would you get from it? And then you actually look back to like the kind of carny nature of a lot of the of stuff at the time. Like literally in articles I was reading about this, they were talking about people like Barnum.
Oh yeah,
Um,
sure.
and how just like there was a whole thing of like because there was enough unknown in like creatures and like animals and all this stuff, you could have this heretofore unknown beast, and it was easier to believe that stuff back then. So it sometimes led to skullduggery.
Honestly, kind of a side note thing here, but I feel like we could talk about P.T. Barnum sometime.
I think we probably could do an episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So some other possible things. Some people look at this as a predecessor or even relater to Mothman
Mhm.
or the Jersey Devil.
Mhm.
Yet again, um, also Spring-heeled Jack gets name dropped as like a similar creature just because of the like lighted eyes that Spring-heeled Jack has. However, of course, Spring-heeled Jack is much more of a human than
Right, right.
a beast.
He's
in
kind of a
lot
guy.
ways. Yeah. But then also mass hysteria is a big thing that people bring up as an explanation for this, along with um, an escaped hornbill is the
Oh, okay,
type
okay.
of
That
bird.
I can picture that. Like the thing is, like mass hysteria plus an escaped hornbill, like explains the whole thing, right? Like
Yeah,
basically.
very easily.
So I could definitely see that happening. They fucking
Yeah.
blow up a mine.
However, there is another theory
Oh,
uh, where in talking to Coast AM, a man named
oh,
John B. Wells
okay,
had kind of a theory that this thing might have been a form of UFO.
of course.
Um, and this was brought up in a thing with the writers of the book that I've talked about. And they said this: "That's the big question. What was the Van Meter visitor?" In the book, we explore a wide variety of theories, from the mundane hoax to mass hysteria to more exotic ones like a possible ultra terrestrial.
Mm,
The odd part
okay.
about the Van Meter visitor is that it exhibited a number of bizarre and unearthly traits: a horn that projected a bright light beam, metallic sounds, and immunity to gunfire. I can't speak for my co-authors, but I tend to put it in the ultra-terrestrial category, much like Mothman, due to its seemingly paraphysical nature. In fact, the features of the Van Meter case are so similar to the events of the Mothman case that one could consider it a proto-Mothman event, as it happened 60 years before the events in Point Pleasant. The overpowering sulfur like odor is also a common trait associated with alleged ultra-terrestrials like Florida's skunk ape, which got its name from its terrible smell. Like John Keel and Jacques Vallée, one of our working theories is that many paranormal events and encounters may all fall under the umbrella of ultra-terrestrial phenomena.
Yeah, that stuff's. I love that stuff. I gotta read through Passport to Magoni or whatever it's called, the Jacques Vallée
Yeah.
on the. Have we covered like the idea? Surely we've mentioned the concept of
I think you've mentioned
ultra-terrestrials.
ultra-terrestrials. I don't know if we've done a full episode.
It's the short version is it fits into like the interdimensional hypothesis for UFOs and cryptids and whatnot.
Yeah.
That these are like interdimensional entities.
Yeah, so instead of being from another planet, which would be extraterrestrials, they're from another dimension, basically,
Yeah.
and they're ultra-terrestrials.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Interesting. I like I like that we started off talking about basically a Batman and ended with talking about Jacques Vallée. So that's fun.
Hey, that's the breadth of the pod,
Oh
you know?
yeah.
So there have been a couple sightings since the early 1900s. None of them are super detailed or anything. I just have a quick rundown of a couple things here. In the 1980s, a man who had just moved to the area and supposedly did not know anything about the legend was walking near where the coal mine was and reportedly saw a 5-foot-long bat-like creature fly over his head. Then in the 2000s, another man and his family were driving home to Van Meter when they saw what was a giant bird-like creature dead on the side of the road.
Mm.
But when the man went back, like he went and took care of his shit and came back to investigate, the creature was gone.
Hmm.
Then in 2006, a pastor was waiting for a friend in Colfax, Iowa, which is nearby, when he thought he saw a dragon in the sky. And when he came back home, he Googled Iowa dragon and saw pictures of what he said was what he saw, and that was the Van Meter visitor. Then in 2014, a couple camping near Iowa City had an encounter with a giant bird. And finally, there's one in Boone, Iowa in 2020, and one in an article from the Dispatch from Moline, Illinois, in September of 2021. So this thing has been supposedly seen as recently as like 2 years ago.
Interesting. What if this is just a family that has stayed in the area and passed down the art of bird keeping, but they're really bad at it? They cannot keep those birds.
Yeah, or maybe their birds just get like a Rumspringa, like they get to like go out and sow their wild oats for a little bit every couple hundred, like every 10, 15 years or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that could be.
I could see it being just kind of like a hapless bird enthusiast kind of situation.
Hey,
here.
check this out. Podcast title: A Bird Rumspringa. There you go. Easy. That was easy.
See, I was looking at a Scooby Doo situation or already. But that does kind of give away the punchline of the episode. So, maybe that's better.
Also, I love that this thing got brought up on Coast to Coast, which I think I've told you, but like I've been like obsessively digging through the Coast to Coast archives recently. I actually recently, there's another thing random thing. I have been really enjoying a YouTube channel called Weird Reads. Check that out. And they covered a story that I remember running across on the internet years ago. But it apparently crops up on Coast to Coast AM. But like I've been going through these archives and I still hadn't heard this story on Coast to Coast yet. So have you heard of Mel's Hole?
Yes,
I know about that one.
I know something about it. I think I came across it doing research like years ago and set it as like a possible episode, but have never done anything with that.
Well, I guess this is just a shout out. Check out the Art Bell archives that people are putting up online, and check out Weird Reads. Both are good. So
yeah,
Mel's Hole is a fun story. Just a random thought, but hell yeah.
So the only other thing I have is there is a Van Meter Visitor Festival this year's. It starts on September 30th.
Let's go.
And they started announcing some people that are going to be there. Some speakers and stuff. No one that you would really know, but they do have speakers on the idea of like cryptids in general, but also on the Van Meter Visitor specifically.
That sounds sick. Let's go.
Yeah,
I want to go.
Yeah, it's possible. I would be down. I also found out about a I found out about a similar cryptid from the Baltimore area that I have made notes of for the future. So that's fun. It's always fun to like come across like, oh, here's you're doing research on one thing and it just like leads into a bunch of other episodes.
I don't know if we have like an Indiana cryptid festival anywhere. I mean, I think we have that one turtle.
I don't think so.
Yeah, but I don't know if we actually have like a festival because we're kind of boring out here. I'm Jones, and I love the idea. Like you got to go see the big Mothman statue. I don't know if it was during the festival.
I went to Mothman.
You did go. Yeah. Oh, man, see, I want to go. I really got to go to one of these things someday.
It's fun. I would go back to Mothman.
Yeah.
That was cool. Yeah. So, are you ready for a big question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I want to ask you. This is a bit general, but I think that there's an interesting discussion to have here. Where do you think the Van Meter Visitor fits into your cryptid power rankings? Because I feel like we have enough kind of interesting different cryptids that I think there's like positives and negatives to a lot of them. Like the thing we have to think about here is how much does that horn play into shit?
Yeah. Well, and as far as my personal canon is concerned, placating somebody by sucking their dick is a pretty powerful move. But jury's still out on its.
No one expects it.
Yeah,
no one fucking
exactly,
expects that.
exactly. But jury's still out on its cunnilingus skills. So, just to be fair here, I mean, power rankings. That's really hard to do with cryptids because like there are varying theories about these things.
Yeah.
So if I were to play to my personal, I would say that this thing's pretty powerful. Blinding something is blinding a person, even temporarily, is pretty powerful. At the same time, it sounds like it needs a runway to get away. In some cases, but it can also just vanish. I mean, cryptid power is often, I think, based on because like we also don't totally define power here, but the way I kind of think about it with cryptids is like how easily can it disappear? How easily can it prevent itself from getting caught on camera? Because that's, I think, a very powerful thing for a cryptid. That kind of keeps it in the realm of cryptid and prevents it from being brought into the realm of like actual like known, creature, known animal.
Okay. Okay. So here's the thing. I love everything you're saying. I just want to bring up you spawned an idea in my brain,
Okay.
and it's a thing that I think we would have to do a stream for. I think this would
okay.
be. I just did a quick search, and there are multiple different options here for a cryptid tier list. And I think a fun It Gets Weird stream would be for us to sit down and try to make a cryptid tier list on one of these services.
Absolutely up for
and that would involve like, because there's not only is there cryptid tier list, there's multiple versions of that. Then there's also a cryptid dateability tier list, and a couple of different ones of those.
Okay.
So I think like we could pretty easily do a stream together of us figuring out.
I'm in.
Lists.
I'm 100% in, especially for the dateability quiz, because I do have sort of like a. I mean, this is a topic that comes up fairly often, I think, with cryptid lovers, and I think that we could really get to the bottom of that, because like I'm sure that there's some. You think about the obvious ones like Mothman, absolutely not only dateable, but like maybe one of the most fuckable cryptids. Like you want to lay down with Mothman, probably.
It'll take care of you.
Yeah, but like I'm sure there's going to be some wild cards on there, like oh, I didn't think about what it would be like to try and romance the Fresno Nightcrawlers. That's interesting.
Yeah, and also like you got to remember that this thing, one of its main attributes is its fucking stank.
That's true.
So hey, if you're really into like, if you're one of those people that's really into
like that.
Like some like odor and musk, I guess is the good way of saying it, then maybe this thing shoots up that tier list for you. I don't know.
This cryptid's for the armpit freaks.
Hey, and we respect that here. So I do think that in terms of like power rankings, we'll save our tier list stuff for the stream. But in terms of power rankings, I do think this thing is pretty high, because that beam that seems to kind of stagger people, that's a powerful move. But the thing that I think I don't think it beats Mothman.
Oh no,
because
Mothman just is it. The fact that Mothman can just be present at like extremely terrible moments, like that seems to be one of its powers.
You came with the same thing that I did, because I straight up thinks that it's the manifestation of fate and is the cryptid version of the movie's Final Destination.
Right.
Which I think that is the most powerful force of them all, because you can't escape it. Once you have been marked by Final Destination, you will not.
Not only can
that's how those movies work.
Not only can you not escape Mothman's power, but Mothman happens to also be incredibly elusive at the same time. So Mothman's really something else, I think, as far as the power rankings go, like Super Saiyan shit.
So I mean, if it's one of those things like you kind of have to think about it like Batman, where if they have time to prepare, if Batman has time to prepare, he can beat anybody. If I can get in there and take out Mothman before it has a chance to like, cycle the wheels of fate against me, then maybe I've got a shot. But that is a
you're gonna
as Steiner would say, Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me. So we take his 33.3% chance and add it to my 66.7% chance. Yeah,
And then you throw Samoa Joe in the mix.
Yeah, it's really one of those things. I'm sorry for people who don't like wrestling. I'm sorry I've gotten super into
At this
it
point,
and
I
reference
think
it all the time.
you do not need to apologize. Everybody knows I'm into wrestling. It's fine. Just
Yeah.
throw it out there. And if people need to fucking Google it, they can fucking Google it and grow up. So go ahead and Google Steiner math, get back to us, then the podcast will make sense. You'll come back to this bit. Do the thing that we used to tell you to do, actually. Go ahead. You got to
Or you pause it and you delete the episode.
You got to this part where you're like, oh, I don't know if I get the wrestling reference. Take this episode, delete it, go look up Steiner math, kind of do a Wikipedia dive on the various people involved in that particular promo, then come back to the episode and re-listen to it from the beginning, and it'll put everything
The
into
idea that
context.
you would have to read a Wikipedia article on P.D. Williams to understand this podcast is a really funny idea to me. Like, the Steiners are interesting, but Steiner's interesting, Samoa Joe rules. But P.D. Williams is perfectly fine, but is not I don't think requisite viewing for this podcast.
I'm just saying, if they really want to get the bit here, that's what they're going to have to do. I don't know what to tell you.
Fair enough.
Good luck out there.
So yeah, I think in terms of power rankings, I think Van Meter Visitor would be like an A, not an S tier. You know?
Yeah, it's A or B for me. I think power rankings. Yeah. I would put it high B, low A, probably.
I guess it has no mortality. Like, this thing hasn't hurt anybody, so maybe a B.
But I think
I'm
I'm defining power a little differently here, because I'm not even thinking about whether or not it can hurt somebody. I mean, if we wanted to just say physical strength or ability, then yeah, it's probably we don't have a lot to indicate that it's higher than a B. But if we're talking about cryptid power, which I kind of outlined, I could see it being a low A. So.
Fair enough. A B to A minus seems to be where we're kind of angling here. So yeah, that has been the Van Meter Visitor. I hope you all enjoy. Be on the lookout for a horned pterodactyl shining a light into your window. Don't try to shoot it; it's not going to work. So let's take care.
Get a chastity cage over that thing too, because it could also go after your deck. It could do that too.
If it's actually a cock gobbling hornbill, then that would be okay. So let's take care of some business. If you want to follow us on the service that definitely still exists as of the time that this episode comes out, you can follow us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. Look up It Gets Weird. We're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. If you want to see us do that cryptid ranking, if you want to know which cryptids we most want to date, you're going to have to fucking follow twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. I don't know what else to tell you. That's where it's going to be. You can also email us like Weird John likes to email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. We will possibly read your email out on the show, unless you send us some really weird fucking stuff, which that happens too, and we don't read that on the show. We've gotten some weird shit.
We don't read every email.
We got some shit that we can't really read on the show. But I am entertained by those emails, so I guess keep sending them. And we do, in fact, eat the emails. That has been established on this show, and we're still saying that we do that. Patreon.com/ItGetsWeird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV, where right now we're watching season 1 of The X-Files. And we discuss it. We discuss all kinds of stuff about the X-Files. We also, at the $5 tier, you get access to that show, It Gets Weird TV, plus another show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single week at the $5 tier. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to our main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday before anybody else. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out talking with listeners of the show. We also have a $1 tier where you don't really get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Here's a tip. Thanks for doing what you do. And we appreciate that too. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird Podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Nile.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.
Peace.